the healthier the biome, the more healthy a person's generally going to be. And so we think taking sort of a broad picture and using supplements to supplement, not to replace, trying to make as good a decision as you can from a dietary standpoint.
You are listening to The Dr. Haley Show, the podcast dedicated to helping you optimize your health. Each episode, there will be an interview or a message to help you discover better health. We will be featuring health radicals on the show to bring new ideas to the table, as well as doubling down on key fundamentals to support you living your best life. Your host is no other than the founder of Haley Nutrition, Dr. Michael Haley.
This is the Dr. Haley Show podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Haley, your show host. And today, well, the potential benefit of this podcast, we're going to learn about some of the dirty secrets of the supplement industry and how to explore and navigate all of the choices that are available. We want to learn how to tell the difference between products of quality that are made for your benefit and products that are made for profit. Today's guest is Eddie Stone. He's the CEO of Touchstone Essentials, found at thegoodinside.com. And on a little interesting note, they make products that, well, compete with some of mine. Eddie, thank you for being on the show. I'm wondering, is it any coincidence that Stone, your last name, is embedded in the company name?
I get asked that. I'm not that clever. I actually worked with an agency, and the touchstone really harkens back to when in a village there was a touchstone to test currency to see if it was real silver or gold. And when you would strike it against a stone in the center of a town, you would know, is this fake? Is this real? And that kind of plays off how we view supplements. You know, I'm a big fan of supplements. I believe they have real value for people, but gosh, there's just a lot of stuff out there I don't have confidence in. And I don't know if fake is the right word, but they are certainly not what people think.
You know, I think back of a book that I read probably in the 70s by Drew Pearson and Sandy Shaw. It was called Life Extensions.
It's on my bookshelf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which it was like a great reference book, something that you could look through and see, what is this vitamin good for? What do people use it for? But I remember seeing them in videos and stuff, taking literally just handfuls of vitamins.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, what is the quality of what they're taking? Because it almost just seemed like, well, we need this much vitamin E and this much zinc, and they were just taking it. Ultimately, their concept of life extensions for them didn't work out as well as they would have hoped. Both of them have passed since, and I forget how long they lived. I want to say into their 70s at least, but not much beyond that. Maybe one of them crossed into 80s. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but they essentially lived within the expected lifespan, right? Which I think that they could have made better choices along the way. Now, we all have our own limitations, and we can't fault their approach. It's worth discussing, exploring. But ultimately, my concern is some of the things that we're taking aren't high quality. What's your story? How'd you get into this, and why do you have your own brand?
Yeah, so I'll just agree with all that you just said. I think one of the things that Durk and Sandy forgot is that supplements are a kind of a bridge between where you are and where you want to be, because of just not being able to 24/7, 7 days a week, eat exactly like you want. And they forgot the value of food. You know, you just can't supplement your way completely to health, right? There's more to it. My story, so I'm about to be 62. So I've been doing this for 30, almost 40 years, and kind of stumbled across the supplement business and really engaged on a sales capacity. I was also interested because in my mid-20s, where I was working, had an insurance exam, and my numbers were terrible. My risk factors were as though I was a heavy smoker, and I was not a smoker. And so when I looked at it, it was really because my blood sugars were already creeping up, my triglycerides and cholesterol. It was just really poor diet, eating a lot of fast food, just not paying attention, stopped sort of working out and moving well after school. And so I got into it, and I did find I developed an affection for what you could do. I loved learning about the body and the role, particularly that food can play. And so it just sort of led to a career. And along the way, mostly working with traditional supplements. But I also then grew frustrated because it's one of those things that the more you know, sometimes you're ruined. And so in my work and travels, going to manufacturing facilities in Southeast Asia to see how ingredients were processed and produced, learning about the fundamental systems in the US where basically a vitamin manufacturer can really buy all the components, every piece from label to lid to individual ingredients abroad in not so regulated environments, assemble it here and portray it as made in America. And I guess technically it is, but not really what people think. I mean, if most people sort of looked under the hood at the supplement industry, they would see it more resembles fast food than it does, say, the pictures of blueberries or cabbage or kale on the label. And so knowing that, I just felt like I couldn't continue in the same way. I'm enthused about what can happen for people in their health if they get a hold of the right supplements, just not was, I mean, I hate to say it, probably 99% of the stuff that's out there, I wouldn't use myself. And so I started Touchstone really to take it back to the roots of making things from whole fruits, vegetables, herbs, and their extracts. And that's really the genesis of what we do. Listen, you've been such a gracious host, and we know how engaged your audience is. I'll make sure we get a link for your folks to allow them to enjoy a discount on first orders. I think we've got one that's as much as $50 off. We've got like 60,000 five-star reviews. So we try to be really good corporate citizens and treat our customers right. And so we'll work something out so that you can place it in your show notes.
I agree with you on the 99%. There are so many brands out there, and I wonder what percentage of them actually have their hands in the manufacturing of their products. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean processing or manufacturing in-house. For some, it might be, or for some, it might be working with a laboratory that's doing it for them. Okay, if you're working with the laboratory, do you know where the ingredients come from?
Yeah.
Did you choose them, or did they choose them for you?
Yeah. I share that same concern. And so we ID basically and do DNA sampling from field to bottle. We use partners along the way. QAI is one of them, which is quality assurance, and it's an incredible global organization that sort of is just there at every checkpoint because you can't be at every checkpoint, but it is important. But I think for a lot of people selling supplements, particularly if you look at places like Amazon and others, not that everything there is bad, but a lot of those are just simply marketing ideas. They're just looking at keyword purchasing, seeing there's a gap in margins. They can make something for a couple bucks a bottle, sell it for 30, 40, or 50, and they're off to the races. I mean, I go to some of these industry meetings, and I meet executives in the industry. They aren't even close to a portrait of health, right? So they clearly just don't understand. And so it's a buyer's beware environment.
Yeah. I do want to talk about some specific supplements, but before we get there, on the whole buyer's beware, can you educate the audience about some of the very basic things to be aware of, such as what is private labeling?
Yeah. So fundamentally, there are, let's call them contract manufacturers. They're basically businesses out there that have established access throughout Southeast Asia, India, China, Vietnam, other places like that, where they can get raw materials. They bring them in into the United States, and they kind of put a sign out front, I mean, not literally, but online and through magazines, trade magazines, to say, hey, if you want us to build for you an antioxidant formula, if you want us to build for you a sleep formula, just sort of name it, we can put something together. It won't be a proprietary formulation, and essentially there's nothing distinctive about it, but you can get away with a monthly minimum, say 1,000 units or maybe it's 5,000 units, right? There's these various numbers. And so for somebody that just wants to be a marketer, throw up a store on eBay or Amazon, figure out a label. I mean, they're literally in business without any background or scientific checking. Now, every contract manufacturer doesn't fit this bill, but the majority, in my opinion, are really just there to produce something on a mass scale. And unfortunately, unlike you who are deeply involved in your professional line, even some of the professional lines I see, they're no different than these sellers on some of these auction sites where there's just not a real connection as you described to what's going on. And so I think quality control is really haphazard, and you can't rely on either state or federal regulators. Seldom do you see them dig deep into what's coming into the states, the quality of it, the potency, label claim. I mean, there's clearly laws about potency, label claim, and these other dynamics, but the adherence or enforcement is so modest, and most of these companies are shell organizations, so quite literally if something happens they just move on with another brand and a different packaging, same thing. A lot of counterfeiting happens that way in our industry. So yeah.
I'm going to maybe even shock you on this one. Being a physician, a chiropractor, I'm contacted by companies regarding private labeling, and I could have my own labels and only purchase 20 units at a time. And it doesn't have to be monthly. I could be 20 now, and I'll order more when I run out next year.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's brands that are out there, and they're essentially doing runs of the same product, and then they're calling all the doctor's offices saying, we'll put your label on it, and they just run them off a little printer and have their little labeling machine, or maybe even do it by hand for you, send them out to you, and it looks like you have your own brand, and that's really impressive when you're a doctor, right? You have your name on the product, as if you had something to do with what's in it. Some of them do. There's doctors out there with truly their own products, but there's a heck of a high percentage of just private labeled, and I'm really in it for this show.
Yeah. My struggle with that, and that is surprising that it can be as low as 20 units. But my concern is the fact that a physician's name carries so much authority, and it should, that the sacredness of that trust is really broken in that dynamic. And the fact that there's not a consciousness of that is, it's worrisome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What are some of the things that you personally have experienced from a mistake perspective along the way?
Yeah. When we first launched back in 2012, I thought at the time, what we'd had would be more of a boutique supplement business, because not everybody is into all this homework we're doing, right? So the vast majority of all of our ingredients are certified USDA organic. There's a few that are organic, don't carry the same certification because of the size of the grower. And we also were really talking about the challenge with most supplements people are using. So most people don't realize when they look at a label, they see C or D, a title next to it, say ascorbic acid. They might not know that that's an incomplete molecule. It's just one part of an 8-part molecule that makes up the vitamin C. So it really requires a lot of work from your body to utilize it. It can utilize it for sure, but it's not quite as simple as people think. Efficiencies, even inflammation can be created in these processes. And this is kind of true across the board. We spent a little more time than we probably should have really talking about these challenges, and not as much about the benefits when you kind of get back to sort of a garden mentality, when what you have is made from broccoli, kale, cabbage, tomato. We just found people kind of throwing their hands up because here we've described a challenge. They go into their kitchen, there's all these individual bottles of products. Like, well, I spent all this money and there's no way my doctor was wrong. Something's wrong with you, and something's wrong when I look it up on Google and verify what you've said. And so it wasn't really for us until about 2 or 3 years into the business where our audience expanded from kind of hardcore users, in part because all of these things like Fast Food Nation, um, these other kind of shows bringing sunshine sort of to what's the ills associated with the modern American diet and some of the challenges in production, where there began to be a little bit of momentum where consumers were paying attention to labels. And it was a real signal to us to focus on our own story, the benefits that people are deriving, and let them come to us. And so we didn't need to spend as much time on the industry as we did. And it was, we sort of overthought the process and didn't rely on the consumer really coming around and developing their own appetite and knowledge. And so we still kind of look back at that and think to ourselves, how do we get off message so quickly there? But the great thing is that people found us, and now I think we process orders in 50 some countries. It's a fun enterprise.
One of the mistakes I made early on, and I just so happen to have this sitting on my desk. It's a product that, well, I'm going to say we make, but truthfully, we contract with a laboratory to make it. And on our first run of this, I had taken over the brand, and I decided I was going to clean up the formula and get rid of all the parabens, as an example. Yeah. And at the time, it was this aloe vera that was emulsified in petroleum jelly. So I wanted to get rid of that and use coconut oil and make it all natural. So I worked with a laboratory and told them all the ingredients I wanted in it, and they'll kind of give you a sample, and then you try it and say, well, I like this, but I don't like that, and I don't like these names on the ingredient list, and this texture isn't quite and what I want. It goes back and forth, and now we got a product, and we made it, and it was paraben free. And I'm, for those that are just listening, I'm doing the air quotes because no parabens were added. However, the ingredients that the laboratory had sourced was preserved with parabens. Yeah. So technically, legally, it was paraben free, even though it contained parabens that we didn't know was in there. Yeah. We had since realized, okay, we actually have to source the ingredients. We have to purchase them and take them to the laboratory, knowing what they're preserved in and everything that's in them. So you didn't have that experience with vitamins.
We didn't quite have it that way, but we certainly learned early on about carriers. And so really preservatives are carriers, right? Your intention can be for it to be broccoli or blueberries or strawberries or tomatoes, but they may have at the ingredient manufacturing level utilized a carrier that completely goes against your ethos and story. And so for us, I'll tell you what's evolved in our situation is it takes us 2 years from concept to go to market because of just the level of background and checking from a sourcing standpoint. And you can't, of course, just have one source because if things go the way you want them to, you could outstrip that supplier. And in some of our cases, it's really small co-ops and farms that are supplying some of these ingredients. And so it takes a real diligence, right, to just vet through all these things that are out there, and you got to have some experience.
Yeah, one of the ingredients you mentioned was ascorbic acid. And I remember my first time seeing that in a commercial environment. I happened to be in the aloe vera business, and we, again, contracted with a farmer to make our aloe unique and different than they do for anyone else. Instead of filtering, pasteurizing, and preserving it, we would have it hand filleted, run through a grinder, and put into containers that went in the freezer. Yeah. So we had to have a very clean process because we weren't pasteurizing it, and no preservatives. But being at the farm, I would see how they're doing it for everyone else, including hot filling it into big plastic containers. They would pasteurize it and put it into the big IBC containers, which are plastic, at 170 degrees to seal up and ship to the United States, where other companies would buy it and reprocess it and then put it in glass. Yippee-ki-yay, but it was in the hot plastic.
Yeah.
But they had these pallets of big, like 50-pound bags of ascorbic acid. And that was what they used in everyone else's aloe vera, one of the preservatives. And I thought, my goodness, if you're buying that by the pallet, that must be some cheap stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Good on you for being that meticulous and careful, because that raw sourcing there, and people just don't recognize that when you pasteurize delicate phytonutrients at flash pasteurization, I think it's 185, 170 for lengthy pasteurization. Anytime you get above 116, 117, 118 degrees Fahrenheit, you're denaturing those natural ingredients. And in often cases, that potency drops dramatically, but more importantly, some of the cofactors that are involved in how your body uptakes and utilizes are completely wiped out, including the native enzymes in an individual ingredient. And so we're leery of pasteurization. There's very few things where heat brings on value. So if you take, I think, oats and a few grains, right, the heat gets out the beta glucans and other energy sources and calories, but you can't get it cold. But for the most part, heat's your enemy. So you just got to do your extra work like you've described.
You enjoying the show thus far? One of the many health secrets that we have covered on the show is all around aloe vera, specifically drinking raw aloe vera. Our aloe vera has helped our customers effectively heal their gut, increase their intestine health, lower inflammation in the body, eliminate and or decrease acid reflux, have glowing skin and hair, and so much more. Now, as a frequent member of our audience, you will be exposed to exclusive specials and coupon codes for the awesome products manufactured by Haley Nutrition. That's right, for simply being awesome and tuning in. You can get a mini discount to help you optimize and better your health. To see how we can help and support you on your health journey, tune into the episodes and listen for coupon codes that you can use at www.haleynutrition.com before you make your orders of raw aloe vera. Once again, it's www.haleynutrition.com. Now, back to the show.
What was what was your first product at Touchstone?
The very first product was a zeolite product. And I don't know how much in your audience will know about that, but zeolite is a naturally mined mineral. We know lots about zeolites. They've been utilized by human beings for hundreds, if not maybe thousands of years. We naturally mine ours here in the U.S. There's a bunch of different types of zeolites. We use clinoptilolite, which is a sheet-like zeolite that enjoys GRAS status from the FDA. And it has an interesting property. It's a crystalline structure. And when playa lake and saltwater collide, they grow. There's lots of it around the world, but you need it to be clean. And one of its interesting qualities is it has a native negative charge. And so when it comes in proximity to, say, cadmium, lead, mercury, other heavy metals that have a positive charge, it'll literally snap together like a north end and the south end of a magnet. And so it's very beneficial in the body, helping to detox from a proximity standpoint. Use it, it's floating around. It's a non-essential mineral, so it's out of the body in 4 to 6 hours. And so that was really the first thing that we focused on, this concept of get the bad stuff out, right? And then you can put the good stuff in. And then we had supplements that were focused on using whole food ingredients, as I described. We had an essentials product that's a variety, I think, of 27 fruits, vegetables, herbs, and others where a naturally sourced organic mushroom provides the vitamin D. And so it was get the bad stuff out, put the good stuff in. And that's sort of where our story began. And really that's still true today. We have some specialty stuff. We have some products for helping control blood sugar, some longevity products and things like that. But we really do stay focused on get that bad stuff out and put that good stuff in.
Yeah, a lot of people, they want to get well and they're so concerned with what can I take? What can I add without the what do I need to get rid of? So I like how you address both sides of the equation. A lot of time people will get well just eliminating the bad.
No question about that. I don't know if you recall the lengthy study about oatmeal. In fact, it's what gave them the ability to say oatmeal can lower cholesterol starting in the 70s and the 80s. And ultimately, the benefit, oatmeal does have some benefit in this regard, but the most pronounced benefit was when people replaced a heavy pork meat breakfast, because animal products are the source of cholesterol, all of a sudden their cholesterol went down. It is helped by the fact you use maybe oatmeal as well, or whatever grain that you do. And so elimination, just like you said, big part of the story.
Wow. So the first zeolite product, how is that different, or is it the same as bentonite clay?
Bentonite clays do not have the same binding mechanism of action. So when you talk about a clay, you're not talking about something with a native negative charge that could bind with a positively charged particulate. And bentonite clay is not discerning. It's more of a sweeping impact as it goes through your system, almost in the same way that a diet rich in fiber kind of sweeps through the body, and importantly, would decrease transit time. Most people, because they don't have enough fiber in their diet, right? They're getting transit times 48, 56 hours. Well, it's a lot of opportunity for stuff to become rancid in the gut and the bowel and be problematic. The heavier the amount of fiber in your diet, the shorter that may be. So 24 hours, right? It's probably a number most gastro doctors would encourage people. So bentonite clay is sort of non-discerning. It can have benefit, but I believe more modest than people think. A zeolite has a very specific dynamic. It does two things. One is it can attract in its cage through ion exchange the cadmiums, the leads, the mercuries, other positively charged particulates that can include volatile organics, but it also enjoys something called a zeta effect, where the charge is also available on the surface, right? So think of like a snowball, starts at the top of the hill, gets bigger as it goes. As the zeolite would move through your system, this is going to be one of the ways it's impacting getting rid of toxins. So the opportunity to do more because it's specific is just greater. Um, Almost like you might hear with drug-based therapies for IV chelations, but without the concerns of side effect, cost, and time you might associate with those protocols. And so it's quite a marvelous and eloquent little mineral with a lot of benefit.
When you're talking, a lot of times you'll see me kind of smiling, and usually what it means is that sounds like something I would say. So,
Good.
yeah,
I'll accept that.
sometimes you sound more like me than I do. So, okay.
Okay.
If
Thank you.
my audience is listening, they're going to say, "Yeah, Dr. Haley talks about those things too." So we're on the same page a lot.
Yeah.
When you
Good.
talked about pasteurization and a lot of the words you use, those are my words.
Good. Good. I like to keep good company, so that's great.
The other thing I like when I consider people that have tested high for heavy metals, it seems like some people just naturally detox and get rid of them, and then others are kind of prone to holding on to them. And I've seen people go through the chelation therapies and then get tested, and not much has changed.
Yeah.
This seems like something they could do on a more continual basis without the expense and probably a lot more safely. Is it a daily dose? How does that work?
Yeah, and I agree with everything that you just said in that regard. And so I do think the challenge, people think there's a zero sum when you go into detox, right? If I detox, I'll get to a baseline zero and it's no longer necessary. But they're just kind of forgetting the fact that they don't live in a bubble. And so there's this continuous ongoing exposure. I think there's 100 plus thousand different chemicals that really have never been tested on humans, except maybe a small percentage utilized in our carpet, consumer products, our phone, things that they're using to grow our food, pesticides, or whatever. And so all that stuff, the availability in the air and water and soil, and it's just no way to get away from it. So if you don't have detox as a strategy, you're just missing one of those pieces in trying to maximize vitality and what I call human potential. And so we see this as a daily thing. And there are lots of things people can do from a lifestyle standpoint. The more you move, literally, the heavier you breathe, you're engaging one part of the body system, which is your lungs, right, to deal with toxins. If you can find yourself sweating, that's another way that you engage. If you've got good bowel, good processes from a digestive standpoint, that's another point of elimination. Lymphatic systems. But there's a lot of people out there that they just don't work like you described as they should. And so they have all kinds of acute problems from skin to other dynamics, and they need more help. I would argue, though, in a modern world, there's a body burden building up on anybody that's not paying attention, whether that's fiber, cruciferous vegetables, green leafy vegetables, which aids in the body's natural abilities. I mean, the body's The body's incredibly capable. Just give it a chance. How about more water than soda? I mean, all these little subtle things that work with the system. And so the zeolite is complementary in that regard. Our number one is a nano product that's odorless and tasteless, a little small bottle people can travel with. And 2 or 3 squirts 2 or 3 times a day is just one more sort of safeguard, particularly at the cellular level for detox. And I know that you travel a lot. I'm unfortunately a million-mile traveler on several different airlines. And you get in those kinds of environments with all the flame retardant material and other things that you're constantly circulating or getting in through your skin. It's just out there, even if you're in a rural area. And there's billions and billions of tons of petroleum-based fertilizers and other farm products created being sprayed, applied to the soil. Yeah, it's in your water, it's in the soil, it's in the air. Farmer, kids, family, community, workers, they all have these exposures. So it might be different in a rural environment than an urban environment, but in a modern world, we're not getting away from it.
Recently on the news, they were talking about recalling shrimp because it was radioactive. And I'm wondering, is this Fukushima poisoning the entire ocean at this point? What is going on? It's everywhere. And I understand that that's even detectable in the farmlands in Missouri. So somehow the pollution goes everywhere, and it's probably carried in the atmosphere and rains down everywhere. It's circulating in the ocean. It is everywhere. Like you said, you cannot get away from it. Without being too political on this, I would suggest that both parties, whether it has anything to do with the temperature or not, I would say both parties probably realize the air and water, they're polluted, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to think about climate change to just realize, hey, pollution's a bad idea. You don't forget all that discussion, right? Just fundamentally, the cleaner my air and water is, the more likely I'm in to enjoy life. And, on the radioactive materials, most of the shrimp in our country that we buy is coming from India. And the exposures there can be in how waste, particularly radioactive waste, is handled. And oftentimes a country like India, Bangladesh, and others, they'll take our waste or other Western nations' waste. We'll pay them to deal with it because our citizens, not in my backyard.
Right.
But we don't get away from the problem then when it's atmospherically available there. And then if you just consider how much war, battle, whatever you want to call it, on a global scale is taking place, and how often in warheads that are not categorized as nuclear, they're not nuclear weapons, but they have modest amounts of nuclear material or radioactive material in the warheads or the bullet heads or the bullet points or whatever it had, munitions, that when that explodes and it becomes atmospheric, you've got all kinds of winds blowing on a global level. You can't get away from it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big part of what winds up atmospherically.
Wow. Now, did you say your zeolite product, did you say it was a spray?
We have two. We have a spray, and the spray is nano size, odorless and tasteless, which has been key. Most people are hesitant to use something and they develop mouth fatigue if it has any sort of strong flavor or whatever happens to be. And that's sized really at a nano size to get into the cell structure, right? So that can sort of aid that dynamic. Because oftentimes you think of heavy metals like cadmium, lead, you're talking angstrom size. So you got to be small to play in that space to get rid of that. We also have something that's in a dropper form. It's a larger particle called Pure Body Regular, and that's to focus on the gut and digestive system. You want it to be slightly larger so it doesn't migrate through the soft tissue and then get into the bloodstream, right? We want the work to take place in the gut. Gut health, as you know, I've heard enough of your material to know what a proponent you are about gut health, central nervous system. People just don't realize all this role it plays, and even things like serotonin, our happiness, right? I mean, it's all sort of happening with a healthy gut. And so those are the two dynamics there, one sized for the gut, one sized for the cellular level.
And by cellular level, you're talking about the nano-sized spray for absorption into the bloodstream, I'm assuming.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And so it can get into the cell structure through the aquaprinas into the cell.
Interesting. Wow. Now, the other thing that you had talked about, and I love talking about phytonutrition, and I do believe that we should be eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and getting the phytonutrients. There's so many benefits to phytonutrients, and
Yes.
the colors tell you something about them.
Yep.
The darker ones we might think of as being more antioxidants. And for some reason, it's funny we refer to them as antioxidants when that's only one of their functions. They,
Right.
they're involved in intercellular communication and hormone regulation, and they do so much more than act as antioxidants. And I think it's important to get all the different colors so that all of those functions and benefits are covered. And I did notice that you have a phytonutrient product, and I have one too. And I would say to anyone, if you don't like mine, find one that you like. Not because you need to get your phytonutrients from fruits and vegetables in the form of a powder, but because the vegetation isn't coming from the Garden of Eden anymore.
No. I appreciate you saying that. I try to tell people that all the time. I listen to podcasts. I don't listen to Joe Rogan very often, but I happened to be listening one day a couple years ago, and one of his guests was giving him a hard time because he was talking about eating a salad or something along those lines. And the guest clearly did not like fruits or vegetables. He said, "Why are you doing that, Joe?" He says, "Just pop something." He said, "Because I'm trying to give my body a fighting chance." And that's really how I feel about trying to get more fruits and vegetables. Most people, if we look at national surveys, 2 or 3 servings, most of those would include potatoes. I mean, there's just a lot of things there. And not that potatoes are zero sum, but it is not robust like people would want. And so a greens powder, which I think is a smart idea for everyone, find one you'll use. Just find one you will use every day that's palatable, that mixes well. Try to be discerning, look at what the sources are, try to get something cold processed. But that's a big step forward. That and fiber. I know that
Yeah.
fiber might be the least sexy subject on the face of the earth, but if you want to reduce your mortality, very few things you can do that would be better than getting yourself 25 to 35 grams of fiber a day. If you just look at impact of colorectal cancer, stomach-based issues, blood sugar, I mean, just all this stuff, right, opens up with just simply getting a good quality fiber in your diet.
Which I would also recommend. That's easier to get from real food sources.
Yep.
But if you're not making it to the grocery store or the produce section or the farmer's market probably twice a week to keep it fresh in your house, it'd be nice to have a good supplement source.
Yep.
There's other food sources that'll last a while, like oats and stuff like that. I like whole oat groats that you can grind yourself and make your own oatmeal out of them. Keep
Yeah.
them nice and fresh when they're in the seed form. But there are definitely supplement brands. I don't have a fiber supplement. I suspect you do. I hope you do.
Yes, we do. For people that are looking more than or for more than, it's a combination of soluble and insoluble. It is important to get that, not just insoluble. That's a sweeping action. Great. You need other things to occur. We also have probiotics and prebiotics, both spore former and non-spore former. So we're working hard to support the health of the gut, not just the bowel. And particularly because we've learned our consumers don't want to use 5 different fibers. They'd like just one thing to mix up, drink, and go. And so that sort of led to this the formulation that we support.
Yeah, and tell the difference between the spore and non-spore probiotics.
So non-spore formers, for people that just want to know, like at a cursory level, that's basically the general probiotics that you see out there. Let's say, for example, if your yogurt advertises that it's got probiotics in it, it's going to be a non-spore former. And unfortunately, in the case of the probiotics in your yogurt, they're probably living off the sugar in the yogurt. The minute that environment changes, you ingest or eat the yogurt, the pH levels and the heat will often just kill off those probiotics. And so you might buy something that says it's got 50,000 units or 50 million units or 5 billion units, whatever these numbers are. Seems like it's a race to the top here, but they're so delicate that almost none of them sort of survive the gut's heat and pH change to get into the bowel. A spore former, entirely different. It can survive heat, it can survive pH change, and it gets into the bowel and sort of clears a field. So you might think of something that goes ahead, clears an environment for those that are non-spore formers to survive better in the gut. And the reason this is important is there's a lot of microorganisms and things going on in your gut that you don't want. They're there, like various types of yeast that you can't get away from. Now, if yeast gets out of control, there's a whole nother set of health dynamics that people need to adhere to. But for a lot of people with the amount of ultra processed food, sugar, alcohol, things in their diet, they're going to have a robust yeast environment in their bowel. And so anytime you can get the non-spore formers and the spore formers to work sort of in concert, which is the strategy of our formula, right? It's going to be better off. Get the fiber in there. The soluble fibers and other fermented items can feed the good bacteria. And so that's sort of the way we approach those issues, trying to take sort of a holistic picture.
Yeah, and there used to be a lot more controversy when it came to the spore-based probiotics. I think people are actually realizing now, no, these are effective, they work, and they were included in people's diets just by the mere fact of eating fruits off the earth that have fallen from the tree. We were consuming these things at one time before we sterilized everything.
Yeah, what we're talking about here really is trying to address the health of the person's biome, right? And I don't think people oftentimes think about just how much your the gut-brain connection, sort of like this pharmacy, right? That this sort of drives and produces things for your body, including for your immune system. Well, a lot of that's also happening with your biome. The healthier the biome, the more healthy a person's generally going to be. And so we think taking sort of a broad picture and using supplements to supplement, not to replace, trying to make as good a decision as you can from a dietary standpoint.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. As a thank you for tuning into the Dr. Haley Show, I have a special coupon code that you can use throughout the month of October 2025. Get $10 off your purchase of $100 or more at HaleyNutrition.com. The coupon code is SAVE10. That's SAVE10. And as usual, you can even use this coupon with on sale and already discounted bundled items. Enjoy the rest of this show. The reason I had actually started taking powdered fruits and vegetables years ago, I think this is a pretty cool thing. People tune in. I had taken a lot of supplements in my life, and I always thought, well, this is good for me and this will make me bigger or stronger, so I'm going to eat protein and this and that. I never noticed a difference. And one day I read this article, and it was written by the formulator of another powdered fruit and vegetable supplement. But at the time, he was no longer with that company. And as I read the article, I was bothered because I could tell he knew more about this topic, about phytonutrition, than I did. And I always wanted to be the smartest about everything. And I was bothered by it, so I gave him a call. It was Dr. John Marr. And I said, it sounds like you know more about this than I do. And we were talking about supplements. And at the time, I was taking a powdered fruit and vegetable supplement in capsules. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But I suspected he knew more. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, actually, I formulated, this product, and I'm working on another one right now. It's not for sale yet, but I can send you some samples. And he sent them to me in the mail. And a few days later, I was approached by some family members that noticed a difference in me. And they were confronting me, asking me if I was taking antidepressants. Because I would come home from work, and all of a sudden I have time to spend with my kid. At the time, I think I had one kid at the time. Now I have 4. I would have really needed this if I had discovered it with 4 of the kids. But so glad I figured this out beforehand. And I had to explain that to them. Well, I must have been nutrient deficient because I'm taking this powdered fruit and vegetable supplement, and all of a sudden I have all this extra energy. I wasn't depressed. I just went to work. I worked hard and I spent all of my energy at work. And this supplement wasn't giving me extra energy. It was just giving me the nutrition I needed to keep on going. So I had more hours of that sustained energy level. And, at the time, my family said, well, how come you're not sharing this with us? I said, actually, I feel so good. I'm a little concerned. So I was reading all the ingredients. And as I looked up the different nutrients in the fruits and vegetables, I realized, oh, this makes sense. I would have more energy. I wasn't getting the nutrition I was supposed to get from my diet. And it has been life changing. Now we have our own brand. This is why I feel it's so important, because a lot of people won't realize until they do commit to a good powdered fruit and vegetable supplement. This is something where you can actually notice a difference. So I don't know if you had any experience like that.
Well, one, thank you for sharing that. And I'm happy you did, because it might make some people more optimistic to give it a try. I mean, one of the things it's a frustration, maybe is the word to say, is that very often people, they want like a quick fix, or they want to understand immediately. And I use it tonight and tomorrow's different. That's great if that occurs. But, it took a long time for people to accumulate habits or wind up where they are from an energy or a weight or whatever standpoint. Give yourself at least 90 days. I think most people will see a difference when they change these habits sooner than that. But give yourself at least that period of time so they can sort of see the joy, right, of a better night's sleep, a little more energy in the day. And just like you described how people respond, even from a mood standpoint, can be because a person's skin is clearer because they're detoxing or giving themselves fruits or vegetables. And so for me, what I found was at home, I could really pay attention to my diet. I'm in this kind of business, and so it's important for me to do so. But traveling, not so easy. And, you described when you had one child. Now when you have 4 kids, as you get older, your life just gets bigger. There's more people dependent on you no matter what you do, more people kind of waiting to grab your time, whatever it happens to be. And so this becomes this amount of time you can pay attention to these issues. It shrinks. And so what do? You forego investing in yourself with diet, exercise, food preparation, whatever happens to be. And so I found that I do understand if I had an organic garden I could eat out of every day better. Absent of that, a good fruit, vegetable-based powdered product helps me make up some of that difference. And so I really can't go without it. If I find myself, for whatever reason, in travel, I'm missing it for a few days. It may be totally mental at this point, or I do think it's physical that I feel run down. I just kind of have to have it now. And so it's really, I've got several things I think of my pillar. One of them is a greens powder. I don't think I can go without that.
Fruits and vegetables have a lot of naturally occurring enzymes which assist in digestion. And I know I'm not telling you this, Eddie, for the first time. You know these things too. But to the listening audience, they have enzymes that help you digest your food. Now, some powdered fruit and vegetable supplements will even have additional enzymes, plant enzymes added to them to even further this. And that is actually almost an immediate change in your digestion. And when you have good, healthy digestion, you do have better sleep, better nutrient absorption, better bowel function. So many things improve.
The public at large, there's no reason they would really have a lot of access to this or know this. But if you sort of look at the mechanics of the body, most experts would attribute about 40% of your energy consumption, right, of your daily energy supply goes into digestion of foods and its utilization. So, if you just sort of think about, you got 100% energy through the day or 100% available, whatever that number is, about 40% is going to that. And so if you're eating a lot of ultra processed foods absent of enzymes, more difficult to digest, it's probably 50 to 60%. And so you just leave yourself less and less basic energy. to get going through your day. And that's why you very often find those individuals eating more calories, because they're desperately trying to source more energy, yet it's kind of doubling down on the problem. And so when they get into good, unpasteurized fruits and vegetables in this regard, and they digest it easier, they're going to see just an immediate rebound on their energy just from that approach. And so I do find if people will pay attention, there's a real excitement to that, like you described, and the experience that you had.
Yeah. So we talked about some of your products. What would you say is your flagship product?
On a global scale, it would have to be our Pure Body Extra Strength. It's kind of acronym of PBX, and that's our nano-sized zeolite. It's sourced properly, sized properly, processed to be more bioavailable. And that is the one that sort of is the tip of the arrow. I don't know that that was intentional so much as that's just what the public really gravitated towards, was something easy to use that they really felt an impact. Beside that, in my book, is the greens powder.
Yeah.
That's just is a companion to it. And then the last piece is our Telo-Vital, or telomerase stimulating products. We have worked with to me, the most important scientist in the field of telomeres. And for a lot of people that don't know, that telomere, which is in part of your DNA strand, as it goes, your DNA and its ability to replicate properly go. And unfortunately, there's sort of a finite quality to it. And so while aging is affected by disease as well as accidents and things of this nature, your ultimate governor there is your telomere and your DNA strand, because at some point when it gets below 5,000 units, senescence takes place and that cell structure dies, and taking of things around it. So it's that ultimate limiting factor that you can't get away from. And so these three things: get the bad stuff out with the PBX, get the green stuff in there, and then also paying attention to longevity. At least for me, about to turn 62, longevity and vitality on my mind. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, if you would clarify that for me. I think what you're saying, we're all going to die eventually, but when it comes to the telomeres, how does that work?
So think about, let's use a shoestring example. On the end of most shoestrings is a little eyelet, little plastic tip that serves to protect the shoestring from fraying, unraveling, whatever it happens to be. On your DNA, you have something essentially like that called a telomere. It's this protective piece on the end of DNA that's important to make sure the DNA replicates properly. Every time the DNA turns over, every time cell replication occurs, that strand or that protective quality of the telomere shortens. This is a part of even just what happens when inception occurs, when sperm and egg meet, that gestation period for a human being. At that point, there's about 15,000 units sitting on the end of the DNA strand, but it takes a third, or about 5,000 units, to incubate a baby. So when you come out of the womb, right, there's 10,000 units left, which sounds great. Unfortunately, you can't really go past a deficit of 5,000 units. So once you go from 10,000 to 5,000, senescence is going to occur. In the womb, telomerase is produced to constantly protect this dynamic. But as adults, or as we are born, we really, for whatever reason, biologically, that process essentially shuts down. There are certain fruit and vegetable combinations and specific extracts that can stimulate the production of telomerase. And so we've worked with really what I believe is the global authority in this area, Dr. Bill Andrews, to produce this, because we do specialize in high functioning fruits and vegetables and extracts of a particular form. And so it's really a great marriage to his research and our work. And so we've got a product that we know from a laboratory standpoint will produce telomerase, which anytime a person takes it, they're dealing with critically short telomeres, right? We see benefits occurring to them. And so it's one of those issues where, and for me, I don't know how you think about it, but I'd like to live as long as possible, but I don't want to just run the clock out in a bed on drugs, just being held together by duct tape. I'd rather live the most I can in the healthiest way possible. When that falls off, if I could just kind of fall off, then I think I'd be happy about that. So this is about quality of life every bit as much as it is about longevity. And so, when we chase things, there's a lot of things to consider: diet, exercise, movement, environment. But at a cellular level, I don't know that there could be described anything more important than the health of a telomere.
Yeah. So are we actually lengthening the telomeres or just slowing down their shortening? What's the net goal of this product?
It's kind of like a tug of war, and absent of plenty of telomerase, you're losing the tug of war constantly, and so the telomere just gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Telomerase is there to kind of build it back. At this stage, what you described is accurate. You're slowing the process down, and you're essentially trying to hold serve. It would probably require a gene therapy or some as yet undiscovered drug therapy to really address this in terms of clinical lengthening. I don't know how far into the future that is. Maybe with AI, it's more around the corner than it seems, but based upon the current work, our best opportunity and option is to try to stimulate that telomerase production. And so that's what we're focused on today, which is what the available research tells us.
Fascinating. I like the products that you talked about because, well, when fruits and vegetables, obviously, you know how important they are to me in the powdered fruit and vegetable. I would pretty much tell most people that's the number one thing if you're not doing it. I have never used a zeolite product, and now I'm thinking I'm missing out, and that might be my number two, or who knows, it might even replace it and jump to number one.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm going to arrange for you to have some to try.
oh, I'd love that. I'd love that.
Yeah.
I might
Personal
have to do
experience will tell the story.
might have to do an unboxing short and maybe a follow up with my experience.
Yeah, that'd be
Neat
great.
stuff. What makes Eddie Stone who he is? I like to ask this question, and someday I would love to assemble these into almost a book. Maybe I'll call it Power Words or something like that. But what I mean by power words, I remember when I was a kid, I remember when I was a teenager, and different points in my life when people had spoken something into my life. And sometimes it was awkward. Almost every time it's unusual, the circumstance. And it's like, oh, something major just happened. Somebody just said something very powerful, and it's going to impact me the rest of my life. Have you ever had an experience like that? And if so, what would be your power words that have kind of defined who you are?
When I was younger, for not obvious reasons, I had a couple of people really mentor me. They just kind of took a liking to me. One of them involved sports, and really, they were really successful at what they did, and said, "Hey, here's some things. Here's some insights, some practices, habits, things you can develop that'll make a difference in your performance." And it did. No one would have ever described me as a gifted athlete or anything, right? I'm just kind of a person that can work and grind. But, you get some insights like that, and just even having somebody look at you and see a little more in you than you can see in yourself, it really impacted me at a younger age. And I had a similar experience in my business career. And so one of the things that has happened for me is I just really realized that when I look at people, and I'm a big fan of people, I just, in general, I like human beings. I don't always like behaviors, but I like people. And I want them all to be the best they can be, not to the same standard, but just be the best version of yourself. And so human potential are sort of these two words that are big drivers for me. At this age, when I get up in the morning, I mean, I like our business. We have a great business, and I work with a great team of people. But just seeing what happens when people get information and some light bulbs go off and they get a little more control than they had the day before. They can take a little more charge. You give them some tools to use that can further impact that. I'm a fan of that. So if I can sit on the side of the stage and clap for someone figuratively, right, getting adulation or applause, or maybe their spouse or their children go, "Hey, way to get a handle on that. Way to get your health back." Whatever, I don't know, whatever. We could describe lots of things, right? Somebody that's so out of breath or not in good shape, they can't climb steps, and all of a sudden they're not going to the elevator, they're racing up steps, and they become an example for younger generations in their family and otherwise. And so human potential is what wakes me up, it's excite me, and it's really that thing that drives my work.
That's nice. That's good. Powerful. Good words. Have any up and coming exciting products?
We do. We've been working now for a couple of years on a series of herbal ingredients that would aid in both the management of stress and sleep in a way that would not cause drowsiness and or have a narcotic type of effect. And so we've been working on quite a few things that we believe kind of get in the way of people's health. Sleep, stress management, really critical, particularly in the world we live in today, which if you just expose yourself to any sort of news or your phone or your whatever it happens to be, right? It's just people go from 0 to 100 so fast. And I don't think they really can calculate the impact on their health. And so we've been working on that in several other areas. We're now pretty far down the road on a vegetable-based, vegan-based collagen product that we think can be disruptive
That is
because
very
everything out there is
interesting.
bovine-based. Yeah.
Right. So kind of like for a gut health, I'm imagining.
Yeah, or just all the properties associated with collagen that people
Joint
take, right?
health.
And yeah, that's right. Joint health, skin,
Skin, sure.
right? And when people take collagen, when you take a finished collagen, there's just a lot of research that says that's just has a very, very modest effect or impact. Your body struggles to use a complete molecule in that regard. So it's all about the precursor dynamic, but getting that right so there's an efficiency to it's important. And so we're pretty far down the road and believe by early next year we will have something available to the public. So we've got some things that keep us excited here about 2026 and beyond.
That's interesting. And is it almost like a maybe dehydrated vegetable stock or something like that?
It's a good way to say it. Yeah, it's going to be a powder, and it's going to be a certain combination with enzymes mixed in because how your body accesses it's really everything. And so I think that's a good way to describe it without giving away any trade secrets.
Without giving away trade secrets, right? Yeah, good stuff. Hey, Eddie, I really enjoyed having you on the show. It's Touch Essentials. What's thegoodinside.com. Go to
Yeah,
thegoodinside.com.
the corporate description is Touchstone Essentials, but the website is thegoodinside.com. But listen, you've been such a gracious host, and we know how engaged your audience is. I'll make sure we get a link for your folks to allow them to enjoy a discount on first orders. I think we've got one that's as much as $50 off. We've got
thank you.
60,000 5-star reviews. So we try to be really good corporate citizens and treat our customers right. And so we'll work something out so that you can place it in your show notes.
Well, thank you. I might even take a snip of you saying that and put it up towards the front of this podcast for those people that could tell we were winding down and already wrapping it up and tuning out. We'll make sure they hear that on the front end. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed meeting you and discussing nutrition. I love talking to people that are passionate about what they do and when it's really about health. I can tell that you're passionate about helping people be all they can be instead of what can I sell them. So
sure. And thank you for doing what you do. This is a great show, and there's a lot of value that your listeners are getting.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode today on the Dr. Haley Show. Make sure to hit subscribe on whichever platform you are listening to this. If this episode made you think of someone, go ahead, take a screenshot, and share this exact episode with them. You can catch the show notes for this episode on www.drhaley.com. If you want to geek out with Dr. Michael Haley on other radical health topics, be sure to check out his YouTube channel, where he posts exclusive video content. All the details are at www.drhaley.com, and we can't wait to hang out with you on the next episode.